I want to speak to you as we consider the 4th of July and what that means, the Declaration of Independence from tyranny. I want you to think with me of the evil of oppressive government. The background of this is that the founders of our country were made up of the pilgrims who came from religious congregations who had fled religious persecution in England. These were people who were quite aware that once a religion is adopted by the government, it becomes a dangerous thing. And by the way, glad to see Karen Miller with us, and she brought with her Uncle Sam. I love the beard. We stand up and let everybody see that wonderful shirt. There you go. There we go. And point, I want you, right? Yeah, okay. That's good. All right. Glad to see him back. Been very busy on the road with the touring. We prayed for that, and God's answered it, so praise God for that. Welcome back. And you see Brother Gary's with us as well. He had asked about you especially. All right. That's Don Miller, by the way, in disguise. What happens in England was that the government began to act as a religious authority. And this is just never a good thing. This is what the Baptists petitioned Thomas Jefferson in this country, that he would add to this Constitution the separation of church and state. This was not considered to be, even entertained to be, a separation of God and state. They understood that was impossible in a reality. But church and state, that the state should not adopt a church. The church should not seek for the ruling power in the political government. Persecution and toleration in Protestant England, the book 1558-1689 by John Coffey, tells of two anti-Trinitarians that were burned for heresy in England in 1612. This means that the government killed them for their religious beliefs, or irreligious beliefs in this case. The government executed Oliver Plunkett in 1681 for being a Catholic. The last person in the British Isles executed for his religious views was a Scottish student hanged for blasphemy in 1697. They understood that once you turn over the control of your religion to the government, there's no telling what it will take, and that wicked men will run it as they will your religion. So the founding fathers of the USA were well aware of the potential of political oppression for religious and other reasons. So the Declaration of Independence, a transcription of the stone engraving of the parchment Declaration of Independence on display at the Rotunda at the National Archives Museum. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, granted by their Creator. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. And that phrase isn't repeated much today. And to reinstitute new government, laying its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. They were distrustful of big government. We are living in a day when, not surprisingly, as the time increases, where it looks like the average freedom-loving citizen needs to do something to change the way the government is acting and dealing with people. It is not surprising that we find now the time when there is the greatest focus and emphasis on taking away the guns of the people. At the time when the founders said, this is why we're preserving the ability to carry arms, is to overthrow the government. That is, not doing what is right. You say, what does this have to do with God in the Bible? Daniel 2, 20, 21. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings, and setteth up kings, rulers. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. In Galatians 5:1, stand fast therefore in the liberty wherewith Christ hath made us free, and be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. In 1 Timothy 2:1 and 2, I exhort or desire therefore that first of all supplications, prayers, intercessions, giving of thanks be made for all men, and here is the idea of all kinds of men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, prayer for them. Our duty toward the political realm is to pray for them, that to this end, that we might control them, or that they might control us? No, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty, that they will just leave us alone. Let us do what we know is right. That's the prayer of the Christian. With that, then, let me share with you principles of the Word of God that actually affect the politics under which we live. Number one, God's purposes for human government. If I ask you, what does the human government in the United States, what does it do? What are its purposes? What are its goals? You might say everything from protecting the three-toed tree toad. I love that animal. Just love to say it. But here's what God says. First of all, to execute murderers. This was the first purpose of the government. In Genesis 9:6, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. Now, when he said this after the flood, he was giving man in the authority of government to take life, whereas he forbids it by an individual. You are not to take another person's life just by your choice. But if a man has been convicted shedding man's blood, then that group of men should take his blood. Secondly, to threaten workers of evil. Romans 13:3a, for rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. If you see what I've emphasized there, the positive of this is rulers are a terror to the evil. There should be a threat that is carried out to those who do wrong. Point C, to execute wrath on workers of evil. Wrath, as we see, is going to be defined in a very practical way. Romans 13:4, for he is the minister of God, this is the ruler, is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do not that which is, if thou do that which is evil, be afraid. For he, the ruler, beareth not the sword in vain. He is given the sword. Let me just say to you, the sword was not used for spanking. The sword was not used but to kill, to take life, to do damage. And so the ruler bears the sword, the ability to take life, and he doesn't have it in vain for no reason. For he is the minister of God, a revenger, to execute wrath upon him that doth evil. When we recognize that evil causes damage, then that damage needs to be visited upon the person who does it. 1 Peter 2:14a, we are to give obedience unto governors, as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers. The purpose of the government according to God. Now I go to meddling here. Point D, to receive taxes. Okay, had to say it. Here it is. God intended this. Romans 13, 6 and 7. For this cause, pay ye tribute also. For they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render, therefore, to all their dues. Tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. And the terms dues, tribute, custom, all have a reference to actual payment of money. They are to be supplied by the ruled the ability to accomplish what God has told them to do. And then one that we don't hear of much, but the fifth purpose is to praise workers of good. Romans 13, 3b, to do that which is good, thou shalt have praise of the same, of the rulers, have their praise. And 1 Peter 2:14, or to governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of the evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. So the twofold thing, to encourage the good, to discourage the bad by punishment, by threats, and even by death. Very little else is implied. God's purpose of government. If the word of God were followed, then there would be no cry against capital punishment. There would be no long-term welfare care for the murderers as we care for them and feed them and so on. They would be put to death. The question is not why they did it, but if they did it. And he shed man's blood. Now, if it's self-defense, that is excusable. God made that quite clear. And the defense of your home and so on. But anything else, whether you liked the person or didn't like the person, it doesn't matter. The second thing I'm going to share with you this morning is the Christian's duty toward human government. This is why I feel it's important to preach these things, because we need to know what God not only calls human government to do, but what he calls us to do toward human government. The first thing is obedience to God. And the apostle in Romans 13 talks about God dealing with the government. And he says this in verses 1 and 2. For there is no power but of God. The powers that be, human government powers that be, are ordained, the word meaning ordered, of God. Daniel mentioned that. He's the one that sets them up, but takes them down. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, the government, resisteth the ordinance of God. And they that resist shall receive unto them damnation, meaning judgment. Judgment will come to them. So the first thing the Christian is concerned about is obedience to God. And what does God say about human government? Obey them. Then submission to human authority. If you understand the chain of command, that God is in control, and then he has given to various people, human beings, authority over others. This is that chain of command. We are obeying God by obeying whom he put into control. So, Romans 13:1a, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. This word subject, be subject, the verb, is Strong's 5293, hupotasso. Hupo is under, tasso is to place. It means to submit oneself, to place oneself under another. Now, this is not a concept of being inferior. This is not a concept of being a lesser person. This is the full-fledged 100% duty to obey the person that's been put in control. This does not speak of anybody being better than you see. This is just talking about who was given the authority. And who is that? Well, all God-ordered human authority falls under this category. And let me share with you other verses using hupotasso here, who to be subject to. 1 Corinthians 16:16, that you submit yourselves unto such, and to every one that helpeth us and laboreth. Now, this is talking about submit to church leadership. In a Baptist church, we have a congregational rulership, we have a congregational organization, and so the pastor is voted in by the church, the deacons are elected by the church, and so you have chosen leaders, and then you have, by choosing a leader that God has said needs to be chosen, you are then set to say, now it is my job to actively obey that leadership. Titus 2:9, exhort servants, this could be translated slaves, to be obedient unto their own masters, and to please them well in all things, not answering again, or gainsaying, not speaking back, not arguing. This is submission to employers, obeying the employer. And this is serving them because God put them, or put you under their authority. This isn't pretending to obey, but actually stealing the goods and whatever else. This is adopting their goals as your own. Titus 3:1, put them in mind to be subject to principalities and powers, to obey magistrates, to be ready to every good work. Here we are to submit, to put ourselves under governmental authorities, and to be willing to do that. 1 Peter 2:13-15, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. For so is the will of God, that with well-doing you may put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. This word ordinance, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man, speaks of rules created by man. It's actually the word created thing, to every created thing of man. And this is talking about obedience to the authorities, the rules. So submit to governmental regulations. And then the last one I noticed is 1 Peter 3:1 and 5. Likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, if any husband is not obeying the word, they may also without, and this is literally without a word from you, be won by the conversation, by the manner of life of the wives. For after this manner in the old time, the holy women also, who trusted in God, adorned themselves, not with gold and silver and precious stones, but in being in subjection unto their own husbands. This is submit to husbands. You should have had something to do with the choosing of that husband. So when you did that, you were choosing to submit by God's authority. All right, the third thing is learn proper ways from government. Learn proper ways. If you do not know what is right and wrong, what is legal and not, learn it. Ezra 7:25, and thou, Ezra, after the wisdom of thy God that is in thine hand, the word of God, set magistrates and judges, which may judge all the people that are beyond the river, all such as know the laws of thy God, and teach them that know them not. We ought not to be the kind of people who say, well, I didn't know. You went into the bank and you shot 6 people and you took money. What's wrong with you? Oh, is that wrong? I didn't know. You can't do that. See? You have to actually find out what is lawful and what is not, and then obey it. Point D, do not try to purchase government. Bribery. Proverbs 24:21. My son, fear thou the Lord and the king, and meddle not. This is literally not to exchange pledges, moving money with them that are given to changers. He says, you just listen and obey. Obey God and the king, and don't try to meddle with that, to interfere with it by bribery. Point E, keep church and government separate. This is, again, not keeping God out of the government. That's actually impossible. Your view of God is dominant in religion, somebody's view, because atheism is a view of God. I was just reading that somebody said that atheists are known for two things. One is they don't believe there is a God, and they hate him. Matthew 22:31. Notice what Christ's vision of this. They say unto him, whose image is on the coin? Caesar's. Then saith he unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Do you see a separation? Do you see a difference? He expected them to see the difference. In Acts 5:29, Peter and the other apostles answered the authorities and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. Separation. And then finally in this point, do not seek to overthrow the established system. If your loyalty is to the ruler, as it should be, then you will not overthrow them. 1 Peter 2:13 and 14. Submit yourselves to every ordinance, the established institution, the created institution of man, for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors, or unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of Sunday school that we are celebrating tomorrow, the 4th of July, the Independence Day, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, 246 years ago, as I remember. It was early in the morning. And so they were taking care of this business. But 364 days before, on July 5th, the year before, they had sent to the King of England the olive branch petition. They sent that to him because the colonies that were established in America, the English colonies, were by king's charter, not parliamentary charter. Two different things. Who is in control, the king or the parliament? And they found that the king was not dealing with them at all as the king's colonies, but the parliament was increasingly taking over and treating them poorly. So the olive branch petition, because people were up in arms and they were ready to overthrow, and they said, well, olive branch petition, dear king, we are loyal to the king. We are dedicated to follow the king. But Parliament is abusing us, and we're calling upon you, our true authority, to undo the abuse that we're having from somebody that's not our authority. Well, the king refused to read it and simply announced that they were traitors and should be done away with. Now, in actuality, what happened was that when the authority refuses to be their authority, they have been set free. Now the people that have taken over, have usurped that authority, had to be dealt with. And so it's not actually a revolution that we fought. Revolution is to overthrow the established government. This was not that. This was to deliver themselves from those who are not authority. In the United States, the authority that we serve is the Constitution of the United States. Every person who is sworn into service, we obey him because he's obeying the Constitution. Each of them have been sworn to obey the Constitution and to defend the Constitution against enemies, foreign and domestic. And so if we have to choose who to obey and who to not obey, we would obey those who are following the Constitution. Now let me talk to you about oppression in the United States. And this I find they have not, yet been willing to do it completely openly, but it builds. Senator Barry Goldwater, in his book, The Coming Breakpoint, this was back in 1976. He saw it couldn't be long before the breakpoint happening. He says this: the government is encroaching, stepping on our places more and more into areas previously left to personal choice. Who actually runs the government? I can tell you for certain it is not the President of the United States, nor his cabinet, nor the Congress. Who's running this thing? It is the army of government bureaucrats in Washington and across the nation who hold the kind of power it takes to complicate the lives of American citizens and destroy their freedoms. The Tea Party movement, you remember that? My brother Jim was a part of that. He's a cowboy out in Colorado. Tea Party movement began in 2009. They took the name in honor of the Boston Tea Party, December 16, 1773. They protested taxation without representation. And so the modern Tea Party movement focuses on regulation without representation. It's telling us what to do, how to do things. We're paying for these regulations. An institute called the Independent Institute wrote this: in the early years of the 20th century, federal, state, and local governments spent an amount equal to 6 to 7% of the gross national product, everything that the nation produced. By 1950, government outlays, net of intergovernmental grants, had risen to 21% of the gross national product. Over the past 40 years, the spending proportion has drifted irregularly upward and now stands, at the time they wrote this, at 34%, over a third of everything made spent on regulation. Early in the 20th century, federal, state, and local governments employed about 4% of the civilian labor force. By 1950, the government employed had risen to about 10% during the past 40 years. This would be the 1990s. Government employment rose and fell. It reached a peak in the mid-1970s at nearly 16%, then fell to its present level of roughly 14%. That is, one worker in every 7 is working for the government. This figure does not include the 2 million members of the armed forces, which is a separate concept. Even if government had grown in none of these dimensions, it might have become a bigger factor in determining the allocation of economic resources, the distribution of wealth, and the rate of economic growth. It could have done so, and in fact has done so, by means of increased regulation. I refer to regulation in its broadest sense, including the legal requirements expressed in statutes, executive orders, judicial decisions, as well as the directives of regulatory agencies like the Environmental Protection Agency, the Securities and Exchange Commission. The shelves are sagging under the growing weight of such authoritative commands. Tax laws also are de facto, after the fact, regulatory statutes telling us after the fact what we're to do with the taxes. Perhaps the most incomprehensible of all legislation. If you ask the IRS, what does the law say? They haven't read it, see, so they're doing what they're told. In regulation, we come face to face with the visible hand of government at work imposing large hidden costs. The costs are hidden in part because they are borne by private parties in the process of compliance, meeting prescribed standards, avoiding prohibited actions, and so forth, and spread across the consuming public in the form of higher prices for goods and services. Somebody has to pay for all the things that the government tells them what to do. Let me then close with this thought, the benefit of free enterprise. I just received a quote from Charles Haddon Spurgeon this morning. The message, Withholding the Truth, preached by Spurgeon on July 30th, 1865. His text is Proverbs 11:26, which talks about not withholding the corn, the grain from people, but he applied it to truth. Here's the quote. Charles Spurgeon, Baptist preacher, 100 years ago in England. Any law regulating the relationship between buyer and seller is folly, foolishness. The market functions best when left alone. I'd say clear-thinking people of all ages who understand the opportunities of buying and selling say that the people who are doing it will be best left alone. So what are the benefits of free enterprise rather than socialist intervention? Let me just mention three things. One, lower prices. Lower prices. If you have a government that is intent upon getting rid of fossil fuel, then you're not going to drill for it, you're not going to open it up, and the prices are going to go through the roof. When companies compete fairly for the consumer's money, they cannot simply charge as much as they wish. They must compete with other businesses that offer lower prices. My wife downloaded an app. She hates apps. Everybody's going, get the app. But she got one called Gas Buddy? Yes, Gas Buddy. It does the research for you, and especially the places that you like to go to get gas, and it will tell you who has the lowest price. You are the better American if you shop for the best price. That keeps everybody else aware, keeps them on their toes, tells them they can't charge just anything they want. The second benefit of free enterprise, better working conditions. This is what the socialists always tell you, that you become a slave of the employer. Since workers have a choice of where they work, the best workers tend to move to the companies that offer the better wages and benefits. Those who offer worse conditions will gradually lose workers to other companies. My brother-in-law is here. He and his wife, my wife's sister Carolyn, have moved down to Georgia. And while down there, and he's always such a hard worker, they're celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, did I mention it? So they came back home here to celebrate that with family. But he's down in Georgia, and he's the head of a crew car wash down there, or one of the managers. And he said, I get these guys trained, and they're doing a good job, and he says, then I lose them because somebody else pays more for manual labor. And this is the way of free enterprise. Then this is why some of the places offer other things, days off or insurance benefits and things like this. So because they know the people have a choice, it's troublesome to change jobs. It's troublesome to go through all that process. But the workers have that ability. And then the third one, and this most important for most of us, is better quality products. Better quality products. When people don't have to compete, they can give you any slop and they say it's good for you. When a company tries to sell his product, he must convince the buyer that he's getting a good deal. The buyer must believe that what he buys is worth the money it costs, or he will find another product. And that's the way a sales thing works. So if I want to sell something to you, I have to convince you that it's worth the money. See? And you have to be convinced that it's worth the money. So I can't just charge anything I want because you're going to find it on eBay. See? Companies try to make their products better than the other companies do. Sometimes they find a new method of manufacture that saves cost. Sometimes they invent a better product. When the consumer participates in comparison shopping, he encourages low prices and better quality. You're cooperating with free enterprise when you shop around. The Independent Institute says this: in large part, the costs of an economy extensively controlled by government requirements and prohibitions take a form no one can compute. These costs arise when governments distort the price structure so that mutually beneficial exchanges are never made, so that new products never reach the market, so that new competitors never gain entrance into an industry, so that innovations of countless different sorts are never made, there being no prospect of profit to stimulate their development in the first place. So we're seeing now, oh, well, things have gone wrong. It's gone wrong because people don't understand anything about how business works. All they know is how to say what needs to be done. The price controls by central government never work for the benefit of the public in general. It causes inflation, shortages, and overages. Back in the beginning, communism began, and their attitude was, all these people selling things, and we're smarter than them, so we'll take over all their business. And so they just made calculations of how many, I don't know what it was, muskrat skins that they were going to need in Russia. And so somehow they miscalculated. They had warehouses full of the things and nobody wanted to buy any. They don't have an understanding of what the needs are and the seasons of need and all that kind of stuff. It's just mathematics to them. The person whose livelihood depends on his business, he's paying quite a bit of attention to what other people are doing. And the government can never do that. Never can, never will. So as we celebrate the United States of America and the Declaration of Independence, let us recognize that we are examining the Constitution of the United States as the supreme boss, since everybody who is sworn into service has been sworn to obey it and to defend it. You and I then need to recognize that if the time comes when we have people saying they're in control and they're rebelling against the Constitution, it's time for us to rebel against those false authorities. Let's bow for prayer. Father, we thank you that your word is clear, what government is, what you made it for, what it should be doing, and what it must not do, how we must relate ourselves to it. Now I ask that you might guide and direct us and be with our country. We're not advocating rebellion here, but submission to proper authority. We ask that you might help us to recognize that when they tell us what religion we may believe, what views we may speak, and what we may own as far as giving us our own protection, they have overstepped the bounds of our true authority, the Constitution. Help us then to weigh this very carefully, to understand what needs to be done. Pray thy blessing upon us to stand as full citizens of the United States and understand the duties as well as the privileges. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.